Did I say I'd see you next week? I meant next month. Life gets in the way sometimes. Anyways, here's episode 2. To start things off, in session 2, we gained a new player, whose character's name is Minetta. She's a cleric who wants to get magical artifacts from the dungeon. Minetta was introduced to the party by Harold Halfpenny, the satyr thief with an injured leg who runs the local branch of TSR. This is where I get to explain TSR. So, you know that little equipment list early in the page of most D&D books and BX clones? In my world, that equipment list is the standard equipment list sold by TSR, an adventuring company named the Tactical Supplies and Retainers Company, after Tactical Studies Rules, the original makers of D&D. From a gameplay perspective, TSR is an excuse for adventuring supplies to even be in town. I mean, who sells silver daggers? Also, it acts as a default quest giver if such a thing is necessary. If you want to use TSR in your game, I'd recommend you not use Mr. Harold Halfpenny, who is who I have running the local branch. Instead, I'd suggest you take one of your previous player characters, ideally your first one, if it'll fit, and gruff up that guy. Maybe your elf sorceress character is now a retired elf shaman who sells a magic item focused set of supplies in her branch of TSR. Towards this same end, Harold Halfpenny is actually based on my first ever D&D character, a character made for playing the Morgan's Fort module in the basic fantasy RPG, a slightly 3rd edition-ified clone of BX. He was a satyr thief because I was 12, and I thought it would be hilarious to give a sneaky character hooves and have him clop, clop, clop down the dungeon tiles. But now, he's a reimagining of that character, since the actual version died in his first session, stabbed to death when he tried to steal from Morgan's Fort. His friends died of boiling oil. Anyways, after introducing Minetta to the party, this week consisting of just Minetta, Polonius, and the venerable retainer, Gregory Gaffer Garius, now colloquially called GGG by the party members, we went for a little bit more exploration of the dungeon, and they found a southern entrance through the method I described in my last episode. The thing with the southern entrance is that it's bitchy. It's enchanted and gives you a random hallway when you enter it. One of those 3 hallways is a dead end, and they just so happened to roll that one. What that meant was that they had entered the random hallway, and then found a dead end, dug through the wall for about 20 minutes, got nowhere, and gave up. This probably sounds like it's bad to you. Bad design and a bad experience. I don't think it is. If you've ever played the first Zelda game, and I mean really played it, no guide, no outside help, just throwing yourself in with the first half of the game's manual and a vague idea of the first dungeon's location, you might be familiar with the kind of experience I wanted to create here. That first Legend of Zelda game is one of the only games I've ever played that's about real exploration. It's a game where you aren't always rewarded for exploring the map. Sometimes you'll find a dead end, or a puzzle you can't solve, or a giant centaur that kills you in one hit. What this means is that when you finally do find something cool, it's a welcome surprise. The rush of your exploration finally being rewarded is mesmerizing, and it really addicts you to the game. Because of this, I definitely have the fondest memories of playing Zelda 1 compared to any other game in the series. Old editions of D&D, and in my opinion really every edition of D&D, ask a very weird thing of the Dungeon Master. When designing their game, making dungeons and monsters and puzzles, they are asked to be devious and clever and a little bit mean, to make intense challenges, confusing puzzles, and complicated rewards. Essentially, they are told to design a world that is at least a little bit against the players. But when running the game, they are asked to act completely differently, to play impartially, or, in later editions of old school D&D, even to run with a slight bias towards the players. I think that just like Zelda 1, this weird thing is strong design, albeit difficult for the DM to implement as the at-the-table designer of the game. The game has to be challenging, and so its design content should have a focus on creating challenge and difficulty. But the game also has to be fair, so the at-the-table play should focus on being impartial and simulationist. If you've ever played a Dark Souls game, you'll recognize this kind of design, where the world is dangerous and difficult and asks very demanding things of the player, but the game itself operates on reliable, simple rules that the player is capable of mastering and is always fair to them. Because I like this design, I tend to run my own games in this sort of way. I design strange, clever, and, very occasionally, slightly mean things into my dungeon, and then play that dungeon as straight as I can, focusing on the creation of a fair experience for my players. This was an instance of that mentality. I had designed a part of the dungeon the players might miss on their first try, and thus, maybe miss forever. And then I played it straight, and when they missed it, I let them miss it. When they left, they eventually found the real west entrance to the dungeon, which they entered, heading north into a room that they didn't explore last week. In that room, they found a rug and bags of silver on a pedestal. Another obvious Rob Hod trap. This time, they were able to find the alarm mechanism and the trap mechanism, and they turned off the alarm before looting the silver pieces. Unluckily for them, as they headed back to the exit of the dungeon, they were found by a patrol from Rob Hod's gang. Polonius jumped forward and told Garius and Moneta to run. He extinguished the light of the Rob Hod gangman by throwing it down a well, tossing his own torch in with it. As he bolted out of the exit, the disoriented Rob Hods followed, barely on his heels. The party sprinted away. The Rob Hods tailed them to the bridge, and then stopped, just as the party got onto the bridge. They'd clearly given up the chase, for now. After returning to town, the party got their silver exchanged for gold, and in doing so, learned it was counterfeit and not worth as much as they thought. Then, they met up with Zinchi, whose player happened to be late to the session. With Zinchi along for the ride, they mounted another expedition to the dungeon, and on the way, found ropes hanging from the bridge to the dungeon island that they hadn't noticed before. Being cautious, the players left the bridge and went back out to the coast of the lake, trying to see where the ropes led to. They found that they led to a little sandbar-like excursion from the island that the bridge was built over. By going back and following the ropes down, they found an entrance to a different level of the dungeon. I think it's easy, as a dungeon designer, to not put in enough entrances. It's pretty likely that down to even level 3, the dungeon levels could have simple surface access. And when you give deep level surface access, it both expands the player's options and makes it easy for a high-level party to skip over the easier levels on the way to parts of the dungeon they're actually interested in. The doors to Layer 2 were engraved with a depiction of an army fighting weird tentacled humanoids. Similar engravings were on the walls in the first room proper of level 2. That room was a big AD&D reference that none of them got. The players looted it and started to move deeper into the dungeon, where they were attacked by skeletons. Polonius was in front and took a hit, a very painful hit, before Minetta had the chance to turn undead and scare off the skeletons, making them flee into a further back room. After this, the players decided to cut their losses and run, taking their gold and lives out of the dungeon safely. They returned to the money changer and got a ton of money and XP. The money changer also pointed out how weird the coins were. They didn't have the typical legend of coins of Westmarch, or any known kingdom for that matter. The coins were octagonal. The front bore 8 wands around a 6-fingered hand, and an inscription in unreadable lettering. The reverse bore a sword, piercing an eye, and more of that same unreadable lettering. The players were content in their money, XP, and cool mystery, and called it a night as the session came to an end.